Emma met Eduardo on an autumn afternoon in a cozy cafe downtown. She, with her shy demeanor and sincere smile, was there just to escape her routine. Eduardo happened to be sitting at the next table engrossed in a book. When Emma accidentally spilled her cup of coffee and a few drops splashed onto his coat, she apologized repeatedly, embarrassed. But Eduardo smiled kindly and assured her it was no problem. That casual first meeting was the start of a story that, at that moment, she could never have imagined where it would lead her. Eduardo was charming, intelligent, funny, and with a firm presence that made Emma feel secure. After that first coffee, they had conversations that lasted for hours, dinners and walks in the park. He seemed to understand her deeply, knew how to calm her when she was nervous, and was always caring and attentive. In a short time, Emma found herself deeply in love, with the feeling that she had finally found someone she wanted to share her life with. Weeks turned into months, and Eduardo proposed during a beach trip at sunset. He held her hand, looked into her eyes with intensity and said, "Emma, you're everything I've ever looked for. I've never met anyone as special as you. Will you marry me?" With tears in her eyes, she accepted, and they embraced in a promise of eternal love. After the wedding, Emma moved into Eduardo's house. It was spacious, well-decorated, but there was something oppressive about that place that she only realized after she started living there. Eduardo's mother, Helena, moved in shortly after they returned from their honeymoon, and she didn't seem too pleased with Emma's presence. Still, Emma decided to give her best to maintain a good relationship with her mother-in-law. After all, she believed that over time they could come to understand each other. The first months of living with her mother-in-law were challenging. Helena was controlling, cold, and always found some flaw in what Emma did. If lunch wasn't to her taste, she criticized the lack of seasoning. If the house wasn't up to her standards, she made harsh comments, implying that Emma didn't know how to keep a home. Emma sought Eduardo, hoping for support. On one of the days when she felt particularly hurt, she confided, "Honey, your mother. He's so hard on me. I feel like nothing I do is ever enough." But Eduardo just smiled as if it was nothing. "You're overreacting, Emma. My mother is just strict. You'll get used to it in time." This response surprised and hurt her, but she tried to brush it off. She loved Eduardo and believed that, with patience, things would improve. However, Helena's behavior only worsened. She treated Emma with indifference and sometimes even contempt, and Eduardo seemed increasingly indifferent to his wife's needs and feelings. He spent more time away from home, and when he was there, his behavior changed. The kindness and affection that had once charmed her turned into short responses, cold looks, and a posture of constant dissatisfaction. Gradually, Emma began to feel alone and invisible. It was during this difficult phase that Emma met Marcos, her neighbor. He was a simple man with a gentle smile and a welcoming look. One day, as Emma was tending to the flowers in the garden, Marcos approached and started a conversation. He was a good listener and, perhaps without realizing it, offered Emma the support and attention she so desperately needed. "It seems like you really love flowers," he commented, watching her with a gentle smile. "Yes, they bring me peace," replied Emma with a soft smile. The conversation flowed naturally. Marcos was attentive and seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. In the days that followed, they met more often, always by chance, and each conversation made Emma feel something she hadn't experienced in months: joy. One morning when Helena had been particularly cruel, Marcos noticed the sadness in Emma's eyes and didn't hesitate to ask, "Emma, are you okay? I'm sorry if I'm intruding, but you seem overwhelmed." Marcos's kind words touched her deeply, and for the first time, Emma allowed herself to open up. I'm just a bit tired, Marcos. Sometimes I feel like I'm not enough, you know?" He looked into her eyes and, with a sincere expression, replied, "Emma, don't let anyone make you believe you're not enough. Anyone who doesn't see your worth is blind. And I can see that you're special." Those words moved her in a way she couldn't explain. Emma felt something different toward Marcos, a mixture of affection and gratitude, and although she knew this feeling was dangerous, she couldn't avoid it. Her relationship with Eduardo continued to deteriorate. He always seemed to be in a bad mood and sometimes acted aggressively, raising his voice for any reason. In those moments, Emma remembered Marcos's words, how he made her feel seen and valued. One afternoon, after yet another argument with her mother-in-law, Emma stepped outside to breathe and found Marcos sitting on a bench in the small park across from her house. She sat next to him trying to hold back her tears, but he noticed. "Emma," he began in the soft tone she had come to appreciate. "You don't have to carry this weight alone." She looked at him, her eyes shining, and whispered, "I feel so alone, Marcos." He hesitated for a second as if carefully choosing his words, then said, "Emma, you're not alone. Not as long as I'm here." The intensity in his gaze took her breath away, and at that moment she felt a mix of guilt and hope. She knew what was growing between them was risky, but she couldn't deny that, beside Marcos, she felt something she had lost with Eduardo: peace and affection. Their interactions became more frequent, and Emma began to realize he was becoming an essential figure in her life. They talked about books, movies, dreams, simple things that made her feel alive again. Each word exchanged seemed to deepen their connection. One night, after another argument with Eduardo and Helena, Emma was sitting on the porch when Marcos appeared. "I thought I'd come see you. I had a feeling you needed company," he said with a warm smile. Emma took a deep breath, still trying to control the pain she felt, and replied, "You're the only person who makes me feel this, you know? Tranquility. I don't think you realize how much your presence helps me." Marcos moved closer, gently taking her hand. "Emma, you deserve someone who treats you with respect, someone who sees the light inside you. You don't have to accept anything less." Emma's heart raced and she felt a warm, comforting sensation spread through her chest. In silence they held hands, and in that gesture, Emma found a sense of belonging that she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew things were getting out of control, but with Marcos by her side she felt strong and loved. Her relationship with Eduardo became increasingly unbearable. Eduardo was no longer the man who had once charmed her. The constant criticism from both him and Helena drained any remaining joy she tried to keep. No matter how much she tried to justify Eduardo's behavior, telling herself he might just be stressed, deep down she knew the relationship was becoming increasingly toxic. And amid this storm, Marcos was her only anchor. As the months passed, her connection with Marcos became inevitable. Her heart raced every time she saw him, and the simple act of talking to him brought her a peace that had become rare in her life. However, she wrestled with the guilt of feeling something for another man while still married. Emma had never imagined she could fall for someone else while in a marriage, but it was impossible to deny what she felt for Marcos. One particular night, after an exhausting day of accusations and insults from Helena, Emma was alone on the porch. Eduardo had gone to a meeting and the house was finally silent. She was lost in thought when she heard soft footsteps in the garden. It was Marcos with his usual understanding gaze. "Emma," he called, approaching slowly. "Are you all right?" She tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed the sadness she was feeling. "I don't know what to do, Marcos. Sometimes I feel trapped in a place where no one sees me, where no one cares." Marcos took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. "Emma, you don't deserve to live like this. No one deserves to feel so alone." The two stood in silence for a few moments. Then, with her heart pounding, Emma said in a whisper, "I feel something for you, Marcos. Something that scares me but also gives me strength. I know this isn't right, but you're the only person who makes me feel there's still a reason to go on." Marcos moved even closer, gently holding her face in his hands. "I feel something for you too, Emma. I can't hide it anymore. But I want you to know that what I want for you is peace and happiness, whatever path you decide to take. I want you to be safe and well." Emma felt tears welling up. There, in Marcos's arms, was the only place she truly felt safe. Days passed and Emma began to realize she could no longer ignore the truth. Her marriage with Eduardo was over, but unfortunately he seemed unaware, or maybe unwilling to see. One night, after a more intense argument with Helena, Eduardo entered the room with a threatening posture. "Do you think you can talk to my mother like that?" he asked, his eyes cold and distant. Emma tried to explain, tried to remain calm. "Eduardo, I didn't do anything wrong. I just asked your mother to be more respectful to me." But he wouldn't listen. With a raised voice and a face flushed with anger, he moved toward her, and in that moment Emma felt fear grip her body. Eduardo pushed her against the wall, his breathing heavy. "You'll learn to respect me and my mother," he shouted. Emma tried to break free, but he was stronger. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time she felt she might truly be in danger. That was when the door to the house burst open. Marcos entered, his gaze furious. "Let her go, Eduardo," he ordered with a firm voice. Eduardo, surprised, hesitated for a second, just long enough for Emma to move away and run to Marcos's side. Feeling his protective presence, she finally felt safe. "This is none of your business, neighbor," Eduardo growled, but there was something in Marcos's gaze that intimidated him. "When you decide to hurt someone you're supposed to protect, when you raise your hand against someone you claim to love, then yes, it becomes my business," Marcos replied, standing firm. Eduardo, seeing he had lost control of the situation, left the room, muttering something about Emma being ungrateful and about Marcos being a meddler. But at that moment, Emma knew she wanted nothing more from that marriage. She felt her body tremble, but Marcos held her, wrapping her in a firm and secure embrace. "It's all right now, Emma. I'm here," he whispered. She buried her face in his chest, feeling the tears stream down as he gently stroked her hair, bringing her the peace she so longed for. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe. In the days that followed, Emma finally gathered the courage to begin the separation process. Eduardo, though furious, accepted the decision with the reluctance of someone who knew he no longer had control. Helena left the house along with him, and for the first time, Emma felt free from the weight she had been carrying. Marcos stood by her side through the whole process, offering his support but without pressuring her. He respected her timing and understood that Emma needed space to heal. Months later, on a sunny morning, they were in the park, sitting on a bench under a tree. Emma looked at Marcos with a shy and sincere smile. "I never imagined I'd find someone like you, someone who'd give me the strength to be who I really am." Marcos took her hand, looking at her affectionately. "Emma, what I want most is for you to be happy. I want to be by your side, but only if that's truly what you want." She smiled, feeling the warmth of his genuine love. And in that moment she knew she was ready to embrace this feeling, free from the chains of her past. "I want to be by your side, Marcos. Thank you for showing me that true love exists." They embraced, and there in the park silence, Emma found the peace she had been searching for. In Marcos's arms she knew she was safe, loved, and ready to start anew. Thus, Emma and Marcos built a new story together. A story based on respect, support, and true love.